A bunch of grapes. Part 1. When I was little, I loved drawing pictures. The school I attended was located in a place called Yamate in Yokohama, a town where mostly Westerners lived, and all the teachers at my school were foreigners. On my way to and from school, I would always pass by streets lined with hotels and foreign companies along the coast. If I stood by the seaside and looked out, I could see battleships and merchant ships lined up on the deep blue sea, some with smoke billowing from their chimneys, and others draped with international flags strung from mast to mast. It was so beautiful, it hurt my eyes. Often, I would stand on the shore, take in the scenery, and then, when I got home, try to capture it as beautifully as I could in a painting. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't recreate the translucent blue of the sea or the crimson color near the waterline of the white sailing ships with the paints I had. No matter how many times I tried, I couldn't capture the colors I saw in real life. Suddenly, I remembered the Western paints that one of my school friends had. That friend was also a foreigner, and he was about 2 years older than me, so he was much taller. The boy's name was Jim, and his paints were high quality, imported ones. Inside a light wooden box, there were 12 different colors, each solidified into small square blocks like ink sticks, arranged in 2 rows. All the colors were beautiful, but the blue and crimson were especially stunning. Jim wasn't as good at drawing as I was, even though he was taller than me. But when he used those paints, even his bad drawings looked somehow more beautiful. I was always envious of that. I thought to myself, if only I had paints like that, I could make my seascapes look like the real sea, all while resenting my own poor quality paints. From that day on, I wanted Jim's paints so badly, I could hardly stand it. But somehow, I was too shy to ask my father or mother to buy them for me, so day after day, I kept thinking about those paints in my heart, and several days passed this way. I don't remember exactly when this was, but it must have been autumn because the grapes were ripe. It was one of those days in autumn when the weather is so clear it feels like you could see deep into the sky. We ate lunch with our teacher, but even during that enjoyable meal, my heart felt restless, and despite the clear sky, I felt gloomy. I was deep in thought. If someone had noticed me, they might have seen that my face had turned pale. I wanted Jim's paints so badly, it hurt my chest. I felt like I couldn't bear it anymore. I glanced at Jim, thinking he must surely know what I was feeling, but he was laughing and chatting with the student sitting next to him, as if he didn't know anything. Yet, I couldn't help but feel that his laughter was because he knew, and that his conversation was something like, "Just wait, that Japanese kid is going to steal my paints any minute now." I started to feel uncomfortable. But the more I thought Jim suspected me, the more I wanted those paints. Part 2. I may have had a cute face, but I was weak both in body and in spirit. Moreover, I was a coward, the kind of child who would let things pass without saying what I wanted to say. Because of that, I wasn't very well liked by others, and I didn't have many friends. After lunch, the other children would energetically run outside to the playground and start playing, but I felt even more strangely downhearted that day, and I stayed alone in the classroom. The outside was bright, but the inside of the classroom was dark, just like my mood. Sitting at my desk, my eyes would occasionally dart over to Jim's desk. The lid, darkened with smudges from handling and carved with all sorts of knife scratches, would open to reveal books, notebooks, slates, and inside, among them, a paint box made of wood, with colors like candy. And in that box were small, ink-like blocks of blue and crimson paint. I felt my face flush red, and I instinctively turned away. But soon enough, I couldn't help but glance sideways at Jim's desk again. My chest throbbed with an unbearable heaviness. Even though I sat still, it felt like I was being chased by demons in a dream, my thoughts racing uncontrollably. Then the bell rang, signaling the end of the break. I jumped to my feet in surprise. I could see through the window the other students laughing and shouting loudly as they headed to the washroom to clean their hands. Suddenly, my head went cold as ice, and before I knew it, I found myself walking unsteadily toward Jim's desk, as if in a daze. I opened the lid just as I had imagined, and there, mixed with notebooks and pencil boxes, was the familiar paint box. For reasons I can't explain, I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, quickly opened the lid, and grabbed the blue and crimson paints. I stuffed them into my pocket as fast as I could and hurried to the usual spot where we would line up and wait for the teacher. We were led into the classroom by our young female teacher, and everyone sat down in their seats. I desperately wanted to see Jim's face, to see what kind of expression he had, but I couldn't bring myself to look in his direction. Yet, no one seemed to have noticed what I had done, which gave me a strange mix of relief and dread. Even though my favorite young teacher was speaking, I could barely understand what she was saying. It seemed like she looked at me with curiosity now and then. However, for some reason, I couldn't meet my teacher's eyes that day. And just like that, an hour passed. It felt as though my ears were ringing, but somehow an hour passed. When the bell rang to signal the end of class, I breathed a sigh of relief. But just as the teacher left, one of the biggest and brightest students in my class grabbed me by the elbow and said, "Come here for a second." My heart pounded as if I'd been caught slacking on homework and the teacher had pointed me out. But I tried to act as if nothing was wrong, forcing a calm expression, and reluctantly followed as I was led to the corner of the playground. "You've got Jim's paints, don't you? Hand them over," the student said, thrusting an open hand in front of me. At that moment, I actually felt a strange sense of calm and blurted out a lie, "I don't have anything like that." But Jim, standing nearby with 3 or 4 other classmates, quickly retorted, "I checked my paint box before lunch break, and nothing was missing. But after break, 2 of them were gone. And you were the only one in the classroom during break." His voice trembled a little as he spoke. Knowing I was caught, I felt a rush of blood to my head, and my face turned bright red. Someone in the group suddenly reached for my pocket. I tried my best to stop them, but there were too many of them, and I was overpowered. Out of my pocket came marbles, lead toys, and finally, the 2 blocks of paint. "There, see," they shouted, glaring at me with contempt. My body trembled uncontrollably, and the world around me went dark. Even though it was a beautiful day and everyone was playing happily during break time, my heart sank in utter despair. Why did I do something like that? It was an irreversible mistake. I was finished. Thinking that, the coward that I was, became so lonely and miserable that I started crying softly. "Crying won't help you," the big, smart boy said mockingly, in a tone full of disdain. They grabbed me, and despite my efforts to resist, they dragged me up the stairs to the 2nd floor. There was the room of my favorite homeroom teacher. Jim knocked on the door. Knock means to ask if you can enter by tapping on the door. From inside, I heard the gentle voice of the teacher saying, "Come in." Never in my life had I dreaded entering a room as much as I did then. The teacher, who had been writing something, looked a little surprised when we all filed into the room. But, as usual, she gave us her kind smile, brushing her short-cropped hair back with her hand, and tilted her head slightly as if asking, "What's going on?" The big, smart boy stepped forward and explained in detail how I had stolen Jim's paints. The teacher's expression clouded slightly as she looked seriously at each of our faces, including my half-crying one. Then, she asked me, "Is that true?" It was true, but the thought of my beloved teacher finding out what a terrible person I was made it unbearable. So instead of answering, I just burst into tears. The teacher stared at me for a while, then turned to the students and quietly said, "You may all go now." They left, though they seemed a little unsatisfied, as they noisily made their way downstairs. The teacher remained silent for a moment, not looking at me, just gazing at her fingernails. Then, she stood up, came over, and gently put her arm around my shoulder, asking softly, "Have you returned the paints?" I nodded deeply, wanting her to know that I had. "Do you regret what you did?" she asked quietly once more. At that moment, I couldn't hold back any longer. My lips trembled uncontrollably, and despite biting them to keep quiet, sobs escaped, and tears flowed freely from my eyes. I felt like I wanted to die right there in her embrace. "There's no need to cry anymore," the teacher said gently. "If you understand what you did, that's enough. Don't cry anymore, okay? You don't need to go back to class for the next period. Stay here, quietly. Stay in this room until I return from class. Is that all right?" She sat me down on the couch and, just as the bell rang again, she picked up her book, gave me a kind look, and plucked a bunch of grapes from the vine that had climbed up to the second-floor window. She placed the grapes on my lap, and quietly left the room as I continued to sob. Part 3. The noisy classroom full of students gradually quieted down as everyone went back to their seats. It suddenly became so quiet that it felt eerie. I was left feeling unbearably lonely and sad. Thinking about how much I must have hurt the teacher I liked so much, I truly felt I had done something terrible. I couldn't bring myself to eat the grapes. Instead, I kept crying for a long time. Before I knew it, I had fallen asleep while crying in the teacher's room. I woke up when I felt someone gently shake my shoulder. Looking up, I saw my teacher standing over me, smiling kindly. I must have felt better after napping, as I had forgotten the sadness for a moment and even gave a shy smile. I hurriedly picked up the bunch of grapes that had nearly slipped off my lap, but then the sadness came rushing back, and my smile quickly disappeared. "You don't need to look so sad. Everyone else has already gone home, so now you can go home too. And no matter what, you must come to school tomorrow. If I don't see you, I'll be sad. Promise me, okay?" With that, the teacher gently placed the bunch of grapes into my bag. I walked home along the usual coastal road, looking out at the sea and the boats, feeling rather listless. When I got home, I ate the grapes, which were delicious. The next day came, but I still couldn't bring myself to go to school. I wished I could get a stomachache or maybe a headache, but of course, nothing like that happened. So, reluctantly, I left the house. I wandered along, lost in thought. I felt certain that I wouldn't be able to step through the school gate. However, remembering what my teacher had said when we parted, I couldn't shake the feeling of wanting to see her face again, no matter what. If I didn't go, I knew she would be sad. I longed to be seen by her kind eyes again. That thought alone gave me the strength to pass through the school gate. And what do you think happened? As soon as I arrived, Jim, who had been waiting for me, ran up and shook my hand. He didn't seem to care about what had happened the day before and kindly led me, who was still nervous, to the teacher's room. I had no idea what was going on. I had been so sure that, when I arrived, everyone would be staring at me from afar, whispering, "Look, there's the lying thief, the Japanese boy." But instead, this was happening, and it felt so strange. As if expecting us, the teacher opened the door before Jim could even knock. We stepped into the room. "Jim, you're a good boy. I'm glad you understood what I said," the teacher said with a warm smile. "Jim says you don't need to apologize anymore. All I want is for you two to be good friends from now on. Go on and shake hands nicely." Though I was still hesitant, thinking it was too much to expect, Jim eagerly took my hand and gave it a firm shake. I didn't know how to express the happiness I felt. All I could do was smile shyly. Jim, too, had a happy smile on his face. The teacher, still smiling, asked me, "Did you enjoy the grapes yesterday?" I blushed deeply and couldn't do anything but confess with a quiet yes. "Well then, I'll give you more." With that, the teacher reached out through the window, her body wrapped in a pure white linen dress. She plucked a bunch of grapes from the vine, placed the purple, powder-covered grapes into her snow-white hand, and then, with a delicate silver pair of scissors, cut the bunch in half, giving a part to Jim and a part to me. I can still clearly remember the beauty of that sight, those purple grapes resting on her pure white palm. From that moment on, I think I became a slightly better boy and was not as shy as before. Still, I wonder where the wonderful teacher I loved so much has gone. Though I know I'll never see her again, I can't help but wish she were still here. Every autumn, the grape clusters turn a beautiful purple, dusted with powder, but I will never again see those beautiful white hands, like marble, holding them.